Okay, everybody come on back in. We're going to be starting in 1 minute. All right.
Okay, I got two questions for you.
Okay. For our next session, we have two folks from Jackson Thornton, Sarah Marshall. I'm sorry, Sarah Candler, Jim Marshall. Sorry about that. And some of you all know them. They do rate studies, but they do other consulting for utilities. And so I will turn it over to them.
All right, I'll talk real slow as people get back in. Thank y'all for having us back. I guess we're doing something right. Y'all are used to hearing us talk about rate studies and financial metrics, and we did the rate survey last year. We're going to kind of take a different approach this year. If you'll, and Sarah's going to play the role of clicker as well. Our contact information is probably the most important slide y'all will see. We used to have it at the end, but we never get to the end of a presentation. So put it up top. At the outset, y'all ask questions, make comments. I know we've already had some one-off conversations with y'all, and a lot of y'all have the same concerns. So the more y'all can talk amongst yourselves and share best practices in this room, y'all live this day in and day out. We're just advocates for the industry, advocates for what y'all do. So do not hesitate to ask questions, make comments. We have somewhat of an outline of what we're going to talk about, but we can go wherever y'all want to go. And about Jackson Thornton, we've been around for a long time. We have about 25 folks that work and do nothing but utility work. There are 5 of us, or 4.5 right now. About to bring somebody else on full time that are dedicated to water and wastewater, cost of service studies, rate design, capacity fee analysis, system development charge, whatever you want to call it. Up until about 3 or 4 years ago, we averaged doing about 50 studies a year, give or take, 50, 55 studies. As of this week, we've already done 90 this year. Inflation is killing folks. Capital needs killing folks. It is a very challenging time to run a utility. And I don't know if it's going to be forecasted to be any easier in the immediate future, given those pressures. But we're in front of a board or a council on average at least once a week. So my hope is that we share kind of our perspective on what we're seeing relative to good management practices, good governance practices, and then kind of some less than good practices as well. Kind of tell some, if they come to us, some less than great stories on what we're seeing. All right. So just a quick overview. Everybody in here has the same mission. Sarah will talk through that, and we will go back and forth. She is going to talk, don't worry. Look at some of the challenges that y'all have, and then really talk through what we're seeing that some systems are doing, things that some systems should be doing, and really trying to implement some employee retention type practices to take care of your staff and define roles. All right.
All right. So first off, I just want to start because you as commissioners and managers, your primary goal is to fulfill the mission of the utility. So I spent a little time looking at different mission statements. So if you don't have an official mission statement, maybe consider formulating one. It really talks, it helps you focus, it helps your employees focus on your why. So why do you exist? Most of you, it's something very similar to this: to provide safe, reliable, and cost-effective water and wastewater services to your customers while ensuring protection of public health and the environment. So your mission is very important. Your mission sustains your community. And, we've seen it with the disasters that have had, the Helene coming through, literally destroying water systems and wastewater systems. And how y'all have responded in those situations has been phenomenal to watch, and how you've helped each other. But you're providing for your community in a way that people don't appreciate until they don't have it. So understanding and putting a value on your why is very important.
And one thing to add here, it's not just public health and being good stewards of the environment. You're also the economic engine for your community. A lot of folks, and we say, I'm down in Montgomery, Alabama. The industrial recruitment that our surrounding area in the river region in Alabama is trying to undertake, and recruiting large industries to bring employees, to bring rooftops, to increase property taxes, the whole thing can't happen without adequate water supply and delivery of that supply. So ain't nothing happening in y'all's communities without y'all's service. That takes money, right? So I mean, there's a balance. Which let's go to the next slide,
So what are your challenges?
and I'll play the role of the bad cop. Sarah will come in and kind of set me straight, I guess. I hope, but common challenges, financial needs, and affordability. As I mentioned, inflation is hammering folks right now. That's one of the reasons we're busier than we've been in our history in the 20 plus years we've served this association. Affordability is a big concern, and affordability means different things to different utilities. There is not a set number on what is affordable versus what is not. Huge challenges around that as costs continue to increase. We have several systems we work with that are actually shrinking. They're in eroding communities. Their costs continue to go up, even though they're selling less water. How do you balance that? Succession planning is a big challenge right now. You know, we'll touch on it in detail in a second. Sarah will, but you got to have a plan. And if you have a manager and you promote somebody to assistant manager in that apprenticeship period, if you will, you can't expect them to wear two hats and be the assistant manager and the engineer at the same time, or assistant manager and CFO, whatever it might be. You need to backfill behind that. It's not just a one-step process there. Employee retention, we are seeing huge challenges with that. Huge challenges. And it's not just going from utility X to utility Y, it's private industry. You know, it's how can you let employees know that they're appreciated? The fact that you've got employees that will jump ship over 50 cents an hour or $1 an hour, there's got to be a way to bridge that gap to let them know that they're appreciated. Ineffective leadership, both at the board level and management level. We have seen way too many instances where it's what I will say is short-sighted leadership. And from our perspective, it's the lack of willingness to take the pressure of raising rates to do what needs to be done on your infrastructure, to do what needs to be done to pay your employees what they earn, what they deserve relative to where you are today. And really, what is private industry going to pay them? If they're making $18 an hour and somebody down the street's going to pay 20, what can you do can you match the 20? Because you don't want to lose an employee. It's hard enough when you're fighting from amongst yourselves, but when they're looking at private industry, which is, we're hearing more and more of that. Just had a conversation out in the hallway about it right before this. That's a huge challenge. What we're seeing from and I'm going to mention two words that feel free to yell at me or whatever, but mergers and absorptions, consolidations, whatever you want to call it. One of the biggest linchpins around that has been affordability. And if this utility, you know, economies of scale matter, we illustrated that with our rate survey this last year. Affordability is a challenge for the smaller utilities. Employee retention is a challenge now for large and small utilities, but I'm hearing too many conversations about we can't find somebody to do X, we can't find somebody to do Y. What do we do? And I think the way things are headed with all the retirements in the industry, I very much think that lack of qualified employees is going to be a driver in consolidations. It's not just going to be around rates. What you got?
Okay, merger consolidation have a positive effect on my employees. I mean, how do can I reduce my employee number by having a merger? How do I make that?
Well, all right, in your situation, and I don't know if y'all heard that, and repeat the question because I've already forgotten it, Alan. The
I'd like merger work for employee compensation.
Right. So the question is, how do you make the merger work for your employees? And can you have less employees? Is that what you're asking?
I like with a system y'all size, you can add your neighboring utility without putting too much pressure on your existing personnel. But instead of having one wholesale customer you'd be bringing on a couple hundred retail customers. So your revenue for every 1,000 gallons that you're selling to your neighbor, you're going to be getting more money, right? Because you're charging your retail rate versus your wholesale rate. And truthfully, you'd probably for a while you'd want to charge their existing retail rate until you got infrastructure challenges, whatever they might be, figured out. That's going to be bringing in more revenue for you, which is more than you can pay your employees. I mean, and it's not just compensation. It's, do they see opportunities? How can I advance at this utility? What I want to do, right? What I want my career to look like, and what kind of training will the utility provide me? Is the utility going to be willing to send me to a conference in Louisville, Kentucky, or I think there's one in February in Dallas? You know, or is the utility going to invest in my future like I'm investing in the utility by working there? So I mean, there's a balance there, but I think in your situation, and even more broadly, you'd be with that merger or that absorption, consolidation, whatever you want to call it, your top line revenue increases pretty significantly because of the extra money you're getting for every 1,000 gallons that you sell. And then, you know, getting your teams in there, and just what we see a lot of in several of the consolidations that we've worked in and around lately, water loss on the utility that's being absorbed, water loss is tremendous. Once you get that cleaned up, that frees up capacity, lowers your costs. And again, that's more money to invest in your employees, whether it's directly through hourly wages, training opportunities for their career growth. Did that even come close to answering your question? Close? Okay.
And I don't know that you're necessarily going to be able to decrease the number of employees that you have, but when you think of the overall picture, you're going to be much more efficient because you're running your utility more efficiently than the one that's being taken over, and eventually you will bring that system up to your current standards. And you know, you're able to maintain a mile of line more efficiently than they are right now. So eventually that's going to help. You're not going to have to hire additional employees, most likely. Do you have a question?
Yes, and not to get deep into the
Yeah.
political aspect of it, but
Sure.
right now, you've got a situation where employers are basically competing for employees. You've got probably the lowest unemployment rate since the sixties, all right? So
Absolutely.
when you offer these folks to come in and offer them a 401k after the housing collapse in 2008, that's like saying, hey, why don't you let this guy gamble and play poker with your money? Are there any statutes regarding pensions anymore?
That would be a legal question. The question was, are there statutes regarding pensions? I do not know the answer to that. Jim, do you know the answer to that?
We've lost sight of the difference between a job and a career.
Right. No, and that's,
Well, and that's part of, yeah, that's part of
and
the
that,
engagement.
and I'll make something up around the statute, I guess. I don't know. But I do think the thing you speak to is flexibility and compensation, right? I mean, for decades, one of the best things about going to work for the utility in your area are the retirement benefits, right? Well, if I'm 25, 28, whatever years old, which I wish I was, I'm not thinking age 35 today, let alone 55, 65. So the amount of money that y'all as utilities are investing in the retirement benefits for your employees is not nearly valued today as it was when y'all started in your career. So and there are a couple of shifts that you can do there relative to whether it's 401k, get away from defined benefit and go to a defined contribution, right? That eliminates market risk, which I think is one of the things you touched on in your point. But it's consider having flexible pay. If I don't value the retirement package and y'all are spending, and I'm making numbers up, but if for every dollar in wages, I think it's roughly 50 to 60 cents of benefits, whether it's insurance or retirement, that y'all are paying on top of that dollar. Well, if I don't value the 30 cents of retirement like I should, like y'all did, then don't offer it. Don't make people do that. Go ahead and give them, instead of 30 cents in retirement, pay them another 20 cents on that dollar in today's compensation to let them make the choice. But try and meet your employees halfway, get creative.
Opt-in, that should basically.
Yeah.
Right.
Let it be an option,
There's nothing that prevents them from doing that, legally, as far as you know.
not as far as I
Not
know.
Not as far as I know.
But-
And I would say there's,
Ignorance is bliss on that,
Yeah.
though.
and I would say as I've a 24-year-old and a 26-year-old, so I'm very much trying to educate them on the value of saving for retirement. But I think that it's part of our responsibility collectively they're not coming out of college understanding the need to save and the need for retirement. So if you're going to keep because I think it is a great benefit that y'all have offered traditionally, educate them, help them understand how this benefits them. If they can save X number of dollars each month, what the benefit's going to be in the long term, even if they don't stay at your utility. I mean, so helping them understand and giving them a choice as to how they want to do it. People always like to feel like they have a choice and matters, and that they have some control over their compensation and what they end up with in the long term. And we've got some more on that employee retention, employee engagement. I think we're on slide 3. So yeah, we'll touch some more on that. I wanted to touch on the ineffective leadership part. A lot of times what we see is a need for everybody to understand their roles. So the role of the board is to adopt policy and establish policy, whether it's financial policy, operational policy, whatever those policies may be. And then it's management's job to implement those policies. They develop the processes and the procedures by which you implement those policies. So everybody understanding their role helps the leadership, whether it's board leadership or management leadership, helps them do their job better.
And that is, somehow that's more challenging than it seems. It's pretty straightforward, but we have seen too many utilities struggle with, I'll call it board overreach, where the board is too involved in the day-to-day. One of the ways that can be interpreted is lack of trust in your management team. If a board is too involved and they're looking at day-to-day stuff, they're looking at the checkbook, then something's missing. Maybe there's some training opportunities for the management team. It hire the right people, let them do their job, and support them in doing their job. Period. If you've got a good management team, continue to pour into them. If you're not comfortable with your management team, consider options, other options around existing staff, truthfully, whether it's internal or external. But it's that overreach from a board where they're getting in the day-to-day can be problematic, to the point of, we have a client in Mississippi where the board chairman told the utility manager what classes he needed to attend at a conference. Not to just, you should go to this conference, but you to go to this conference, and at 8:30 you're in this room, at 10:30 you're in that room. If you don't trust the manager to decide what education he or she needs, that doesn't make any sense to me. That is a gross overreach. Trust your staff. If you don't trust them, figure out why, work through it, communicate. It might be hard conversations, it will be worth it. But it's with your management team, make sure they have what they need to get the job done as y'all see fit, and that's clarity of vision and teamwork. There are plenty of utilities that knock it out of the park all the time. And the size of the utility has no bearing on that. Whether you're a massive utility or, you know, you've got less than 2,000 customers and small utility, we've seen excellence at all levels. We've seen problems at all levels. We have seen some really big utilities that have been run really poorly. We've seen some small ones that are run exceptionally well. And it's because the ones where they are running exceptionally well, everybody's on the same page. It's
compliance, notice of violations, findings and audits, so what are those things that you would say, without overstepping, what things do you recommend board members to watch?
I mean, how to define overreach? What are the key metrics that a board should watch? I mean, obviously, water quality issues, water quality concerns will be up there, regulatory challenges, financial.
Financial policies, debt service coverage ratios, cash reserve policies, budgeting process, things like that on the financial side. Operational, is TDEC coming in? Those are things to watch for.
And buy-in and support of a capital work plan, of an asset management plan.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of that, looking at financial metrics, you have to get the reports and you're just looking backwards the whole time. Well, if you look asset management plan, this is what we plan to do, this is what we're planning to do over the next 3, 4, 5 years. There should be kind of checkpoints throughout that process. Truthfully, as part of a strategic planning initiative as well. And it all comes down to communication.
Yeah.
All of this comes down to communication. Y'all are all in a public service. You're all here because you serve your community and you value your community. Very noble cause, literally life-sustaining industry. Work well with each other. Communicate. I mean, and we have seen some way too often back channel communications. If you have a problem with somebody or you want to compliment somebody, talk to them face to face.
I would say if you're having a meeting after the meeting to talk about who said what in the meeting, not a good sign, right? You all need to be able to have those difficult conversations with the person or with the board or the board with you, to have those difficult conversations face to face, because you don't want to, well, he said this or she said this, and it sounds very simple. It's what we teach our children, but you need to have those conversations so that you clear the air and, remembering that you're all serving that same purpose, right? You're all serving the purpose, and your intent and your goal is to provide safe, reliable, life-sustaining service to your communities. And it's a hard job. It's an expensive job. But remembering that you all have the same goal helps you have those more difficult conversations, because you may be coming at it differently, or have different ideas about it, but work through those and kind of come at it when you're sitting down and you're maybe mad at somebody or you don't feel like you're being understood. Remember that you do have the same goals. You just might see it a little bit differently.
The silent service and community engagement, I'll speak to it and kind of in one synopsis, one bullet point. Then we'll finally get to slide 4. All your assets are underground. Nobody really appreciates or let alone values the service y'all provide. It rains, it should be free. There's a river, it's right there. Very few customers have any idea the amount of money that is spent year after year, decade after decade, to make sure that y'all are able to deliver safe and reliable water. Silent service. That's why community engagement is important. Brag on yourself. It's something as simple as, everybody has capital needs right now. We are about to spend, in the next 6 months, we're going to spend $10 million and here's the project we're going to do, and here's the benefit. For way too long, utilities have kind of tried to, and this is a generalization, but utilities hadn't really talked about the money that's being invested, and because it might lead to a rate increase, and you want to avoid that at all costs. Well, safe, reliable service, meeting regulatory standards, EPA is not going to regulate themselves out of a job. There's always going to be something. There's always going to be a regulatory challenge. And when regulatory challenges occur, that's just more money for y'all to spend. That's all. I mean, not making light of it, but that's anytime there's a new hurdle that's going to affect the treatment process, whatever, that's just dollar signs. Talk about what you're doing to stay ahead of the curve to provide safe service. Reach out to your community, whether it's Facebook or LinkedIn or anything, press releases, whatever it might be. Let your folks know what you're doing in a proactive way. It doesn't just have to be communicating about main breaks. I mean, that's terribly important to do, but it can also be, main breaks are viewed as a negative. It can also be very much a positive communication. This is what we're doing. Here's the benefit. This is when we anticipate getting started. Here's when we hope it ends, weather permitting. But it's community engagement is becoming more and more important.
So we have talked a lot about the problems. And we've touched on some of the solutions. You're going to see this looks very similar to the slide before. I've highlighted the ones we're going to try to touch on today as we started to develop this presentation, and kind of the things we see and the things that get us excited about the opportunities that utilities have to improve. This is the list we came up with, and we're going to talk through the financial, we're going to talk through succession planning, employee retention and engagement we've already touched on, and if we can get to it, leadership development. But these are all things that we see that utilities really have an opportunity to explore how you can use these tools in your utility. We're going to list some best practices, some ideas, some things that we've seen done well. And I'd love to hear from y'all on things that y'all have done. I think one of the best things about TAUD is the sharing of practices. Y'all all come into here and you share what has worked for you, what hasn't worked for you, and that's a huge part of how you make your utility better.
All right, financial. We're not going to spend a ton of time on this because y'all have heard us talk on this. I think this is the third out of the last 4 years we've presented, or 4 of the last 5. I can't remember, but financial stability is vitally important. Pretty obvious. A capital plan is becoming a bigger and bigger part of that. We have worked with way too many systems over the years that have done everything possible to delay any type of capital improvements that they can. They have kicked the can down the road way too long, whether it's due to shortage of personnel, whether it's due to just not wanting to spend the money because you'd have to raise rates, and if you add assets, and you got to figure out the depreciation on it too, and that and that's not always a great word, although I think it's a fantastic word. I've heard Ross present on that enough. Depreciation is a great tool for y'all to use to continue to reinvest in your system. But we can go to the next one. All right, so best practices. One thing where we do see a huge opportunity for improvement is in your financial policies.
I'm curious, how many of y'all actually have written, adopted financial policies on the board level? Would highly, highly encourage y'all to put some of that stuff in writing. You may think, oh, this is obvious. We should be doing this. But it is a gift you can give to yourself as a board member, because it puts up the expectations of how you want to run the utility. And it's a gift to the management, because then they know these are the criteria that we need to meet, whether it's cash reserves, whether, whatever it might be. But it is a gift you can give yourself to have that actually outlined and defined. And then it's nobody, it doesn't change. It can change over time, but when a new board member comes in or management changes or anything like that, you at least have a written policy on this is the way we want this utility to run.
And I think the cash reserve policy is one Sarah and I both serve on national committees through AWWA, and those committees put out a white paper on cash reserve policies that basically kind of gives some case studies on what utilities across the country are doing. And it's, there's not this is the way to do it. There's not one singular way. Not everybody in here needs to have the same cash reserve policy. I do think everybody in here should consider adopting a cash reserve policy, but what works for Consolidated may not work for West Knox. HB&TS might need to do something different than First. So think of it this way. We had, and I forget the amount of money. I'll say $10 million. We have a client that has $10 million in the bank worth, or 6 months worth, or 18 months worth of depreciation on hand for us to consider ourselves financially stable. That is your defense and why you have that theoretical $10 million in the bank. That gives you, I'll say, gives you cover as to why having that reserve policy in place is a tool with which you defend your cash position and the financial stability and viability of the districts or the utilities. That drives decisions. You can look out, and if you see cash is going to dip below whatever the appropriate threshold is in 6 months because of a capital project coming on, whatever it might be, well, don't wait until you've broken the barrier. Go ahead and do something about it before you pop the balloon or whatever. That was not a great analogy, but
Be proactive.
thank you. Obviously, budgeting, that's just common sense. Capital improvement plans, that's a big area that we see that can be done better. Whether it's your routine line replacements, replacing fleet, let alone plant expansions and the like. Obviously, we're big fans of cost of service studies. We work with a lot of y'all in here on a regular basis, most of y'all every other year. And then system development fees and capacity fees, that's a tremendously important tool or another arrow to have in your quiver, tool in your toolbox, whatever you want to say, to help try and stabilize rates. Growth should pay for growth. If you're having to expand your treatment capacity, it's not due to the little old lady that's been on your system for 15 or 20 years. She's not driving the need to raise or increase capacity. Why should she pay for it? Let the folks that are moving into town pay for their fair share of it. And every dollar you get from those fees is a dollar less you have to get from rates.
All right, we're going to move on to succession planning. And I just took this from the EPA. Between 30 and 50% of the water workforce is eligible to retire in the next 5 to 10 years. This is actually a couple of years old, so it's really 5 to 8 years. How many of you managers are retiring in the next 5 years? Handful. Of the ones that, so I'm not sure, thinking about it. Of those of you that are retiring in the next 5 or even 8 years, is there a plan for your replacement? Raise your hand if you've got a plan for that. Good job. Good job. What we are seeing is that succession planning piece is vitally important. I'm going to walk through a couple of slides. All a succession plan is just a strategy for ensuring that smooth transition, right? You've had a manager in there for years, retires, leaves, heaven forbid, dies, whatever happens, the change is the only constant in life, right? So it's going to change. So let's plan for it. And it's really, people think about it on the manager level. You've got it at every level of the utility. I mean, a customer service person that has been there and been in charge of that area of the utility for 30 years, that's a lot of institutional knowledge, right? So let's make sure we've got people that can step into those roles and give them every opportunity to succeed. So it's every level of the organization. Just talking through best practices. Y'all hear us say it all the time in the financial realm. Be proactive. Don't be reactive. Don't wait for something to happen or something to go wrong. Plan, 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 plan. It will be your friend. Um, you know, invest in your employees. Communicate transparently. So you think about it, everybody knows manager A is going to retire in 5 years. Oftentimes what we see, because of a lack of transparency, a lack of communication as to how that succession is going to work, well, then you get a lot of chatter between all the people that think that they might want to be the next manager. So be open about how that process is going to work. It is better to go ahead and say, you know, this is, as a board of management, this is how we want this process to work. This is what we think is best. Get feedback. And you know, what you don't want is somebody that's sitting in a role, whether it's operations person, an engineer, thinking that they're going to have the opportunity to be the next manager when that hadn't been the plan all along. So be fair to yourself and to your employees and communicate that. Again, tough conversations, but important conversations. Cross-train, diversify your bench. You know, Jim mentioned we work with a lot of y'all every other year, some every year, on cost of service. Typically, in a cost of service meeting, when we're meeting with management, it's either one person or two people. We have a handful of utilities that bring in their operations people, they bring in their customer service people, whoever is helping run the organization. And why is that? They want them to understand how their rates are developed and why, when they're filling out their budget, why it's important. It helps them understand the overall functioning, their part in the functioning of the utility.
Clarity of vision.
Yep. Consider external options. I think this is going to be a bigger piece of the puzzle, particularly for smaller utilities. You just can't necessarily have another full-time person. You know, get help with things that you can outsource. You know, a second set of eyes on the books when they close every month, whatever that might be. You all know better than I do, but I think there are some creative ways to think about it, particularly for utilities that are smaller, that don't have as deep of an employee pool from which to pull. That can be very important.
And I'll interject one thing here before we go to the next slide, but are y'all familiar with the Peter principle, where you're promoted to your level of incompetence? Just because you're a great, I picked on the boards, now I'll pick on management. Just because you're a great engineer doesn't mean you're going to be a great manager. Just because you're a great operator doesn't mean you're going to be a great manager. Different skill sets. Being an engineer, I'm not one, obviously. A lot of weeds, right? You're down in the nitty gritty. Part of being a manager is creating a team, leading a team, and in certain instances, being an inspirational leader. That isn't necessarily part of the immediate toolbox that an engineer has. Well, if you're looking out 5 years, your manager's leaving, you've got a stud of an engineer, and he or she has potential. Start sending them to leadership classes now. Give them the tools they need to succeed. Don't wait until they're a manager. What you got?
Absolutely, absolutely. Guess what? No, very, very good point. So the question was, at what point is your water bill going to be as much as your telephone bill, your power bill? I would say to you that it is not an expense conversation, it's a values conversation. You can live without your telephone. We may think we can't. You can live without your telephone. Cannot you cannot live without water. Pardon? I'm sorry. So I think as an industry, and you've heard us talk on it before, as an industry, people do not value water and sewer service. And so it's a values conversation. It's helping people understand that we have to pay our employees a competitive wage. We have to give them benefits and training. They are providing a life-sustaining service to their community, and that has a tremendous value. Economic value, as Jim pointed out, health value, all of it becomes, yes, you know what? You are going to have to pay more. You are going to need to get creative because there's going to be a really tight pull for people, and just finding people that you can invest in. I think, it, not everybody has to go to college. If you can get people in that you can train, and they can feel valued and they know they have a career path, that's a great thing. So yes, your costs are going to go up, which means your rates are going to go up. And it's that balance of affordability, and it's a balance of, and we'll get to it in a minute on the employee retention, but keeping your employees saves you a whole lot of money. So, they're paying them 50 cents more or $1 more or whatever it might be.
I mean, if you want them to get out and get knee deep in a ditch when it's 25 degrees outside,
Yep.
it's going to take more than a $2 bump over fries and slinging burgers at McDonald's. I mean, and you know that. I mean, we're talking in the same direction, or on the same point in a different direction. It's going to cost more. Period. You've got to get your employees. What's the Richard Branson quote about you train them so that they can leave. You treat them well enough so that they don't want to. It's not just about compensation. It's about opportunities. It's about growth in their own career. Are you going to support that growth? Right? Once you get them, you can't afford to lose them, because it is going to get more and more competitive. I mean, Big Creek, what y'all got Nissan not too far, Bridgestone not too far from you. So it's private industries as well that you're competing against that makes it challenging. I mean, we have a client in Alabama, East Alabama, and we're not going to get through the slides, but we knew that. But we have a client in East Alabama that asks us to do a compensation analysis. Are they paying fair relative to the other utilities in the area? Went and met with the board, went and met with the manager. They weren't losing employees to the other utilities. So that comparison didn't mean a dadgum thing. There was a new auto manufacturer that came in that started taking the employees. They were paying on a completely different pay scale. This utility had to adapt to that, not surrounding utilities. So it's you got to pay enough to get them in the door, and then keep paying them enough so that they don't want to walk back out the door.
And we're going to go kind of quick because I do want to leave a little extra time for questions. These are two slides that Kina at first developed several years ago when we gave a presentation on culture and why the culture of your utility is important. but understanding the value of keeping your employees, the turnover costs, you're losing talent, you've invested in these workers, you've invested, you need to get a return on your investment. This is a very busy sheet, but at the end of the day, you can put a number to it. How much does it cost you when somebody leaves you? In this particular example, the total cost of the turnover was almost $30,000. So if you've got somebody making $50,000 and they're leaving over whatever they're leaving for, it's going to cost you. So do you want to spend an extra $10,000 on them, or do you want to start all over with a new person and it costs you 30? So think about the value and what you're losing when an employee leaves. Again, Jim touched on this. This is one of my favorite quotes. People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Treat your people well. They have families and lives and feelings, and they're trying to balance a lot, as we all are. All right, I'll touch on this real quick. Employee engagement should be kind of common sense, but you don't want your people just coming in, punching a time clock, getting a paycheck. Invest in them, care about them. The more engaged an employee is, these were some numbers I pulled that's not specific to utility, but engaged employees are 17% more productive. They're 31% lower turnover rate, and they're 87% less likely to leave. That doesn't all have to do with money. That has to do with how you make them feel and how you show up for them. That can be anything from work-life balance. I know everybody struggled with it since things have kind of changed relative to coming out of the pandemic, but work with people. If somebody's got a sick 3-year-old at home, they're not going to give you 100% that day. So help them feel like they have the ability to balance their life at home and their life at work. Show you care, recognize and rewards. I was hoping to get to asking y'all, if y'all have some things that you've done that have worked well, share it with each other. Do you have anything to add on that? So we've got about 5 minutes, I think.
No, do y'all have any questions, concerns, challenges?
Pushback? No. I'll push back a little bit with that. I mean, I think there are some things that you can do to help them see. Everybody wants to feel like they're contributing. So if you can help them understand how their job, how them getting out in the ditch at 25 degrees in the middle of the night to fix a main break, how you value that and how it's important. It's not about catering to or begging or that it's not a transactional relationship. I give you this, you give me that. It is, I care about you. I care about what you can offer the utility, and you care about, you want to establish them caring about their job and why it's important. Good. Yes, absolutely. Right, you have to have some boundaries, and I mean, you know, and if you do feel like you're doing everything that you can do, and they leave anyway, maybe it wasn't the place for them. And yeah, you can't just. I understand what you're saying. Absolutely. Yes. Oh, sure. We can. Yep. Glad to send it. Glad to send it because we did not get to everything, and you know, and grab me. I love to talk about this stuff. And if there's any way we can help y'all or answer questions, glad to. Is there another question? Go ahead.
Blanket statement, but I think the time that you realize that you've got not enough employees to accomplish your workload for the day, and when you approach human resources about it, their first response is, well, nobody wants to work. That's the day you need to find, well, okay, able to human resources. So the problem's going to fix itself in that sense. When you lose enough employees, even if they get the job, they have to.
Yeah. No. Good point.
Thank y'all very much.
Thank you all very much. Yep.